The story begins with a team of group explorers navigating the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. On that ship was a weather officer named David, whose job was to report on the weather conditions. They were heading toward a remote island located right in the middle of the ocean. The government had sent David there to observe the shifting weather patterns of the island. David was supposed to stay there for about a year. After collecting weather data for the entire year, he was to return home. After many days of traveling, they finally reached the island. They disembarked onto the island with the help of a small boat. There was a lighthouse and a small house on the island where David was supposed to live. Before him, another weather officer named Robert lived there, but his tenure had now come to an end. Robert had lived alone on the island for a year to collect weather data. Now, David was to take his place for the next year, and the old officer, Robert, was supposed to return with the ship. The grim discovery. However, when the entire team visited the house, they were shocked. There was no sign of any human presence. In this, the captain and David thought that perhaps someone might be inside the lighthouse. They saw that the entire lighthouse was surrounded by sharp, pointed wooden stakes, as if someone had intentionally fortified it so that no one could enter. The captain and David knocked on the lighthouse door multiple times, but they pushed the door hard and broke in. Inside the lighthouse, they found a man named Gruner. When they questioned Gruner about the old weather officer, Robert, he replied that Robert was dead. He said Robert had gone toward the sea and never returned. Hearing Gruner's words, both David and the captain were stunned. After hearing this, the captain told David, "If you want, you can still come back with us." But David refused to go back. Following his decision, the captain handed him a gun for self-defense and said, "This place does not look safe to me. Take care of yourself." The mystery of the diary. After the captain left, David settled into the house a bit, making it livable. As night fell, he found a diary inside a drawer that belonged to the previous weather officer, Robert. A lot was written about the island in that diary. There were mentions of a mysterious creature, but the details were vague and incomplete. On one page of the diary, there was also a photograph of the old officer's wife. Exhausted from reading, David gradually drifted off to sleep. The next morning, David began collecting weather data. But as he reached near the shore, his steps halted. He noticed that some stones were arranged in a bizarre pattern among the rocks, and seashells were placed between them. David thought Gruner might have done this. Shrugging it off, he went back to his work. While working, when he looked toward the lighthouse through his binoculars, he saw another person alongside Gruner. That night, David was busy with his work when suddenly, there was a knock at the door. He thought it might be Gruner. David called out his name, but there was no answer. Holding a lamp, as David moved toward the door, strange sounds began echoing in his ears, sounds that were definitely not human. Then, he saw a grotesque creature's hand trying to crawl in from under the door. It looked nothing like a human hand. He immediately rushed to the basement and hid. Within moments, the mysterious creature broke into the house. It was stealthily searching for David, and David watched it through a small crack in the basement door. Due to a slight movement, the creature spotted David. To save himself, David immediately grabbed a knife and stabbed the creature in its eye. Screaming in pain, the creature fled. It was confirmed in David's mind that whatever was written in the diary about the creatures was absolutely true. The next morning, when David went outside, he saw footprints on the sand that did not belong to a human. The tracks went straight into the sea and vanished. Now, David understood exactly why Gruner had surrounded the lighthouse with sharp wooden stakes. He realized that if he stayed in that house, those creatures would eventually kill him. David ran toward the lighthouse and screamed at Gruner, "Open the gate. Let me in." But Gruner refused to let him in and said, "You should have left with the ship." David returned disappointed because Gruner didn't even want him near the lighthouse and threw water at him to drive him away. Now, David had to do something on his own. He boarded up every window of the house with wood, built a perimeter of sharp stakes around it, and placed old papers and books outside the gate, pouring oil over them so that if the creatures returned, he could scare them away with fire. Fortunately, he found an old box inside the house containing a gun and plenty of ammunition. Seeing this gave him a glimmer of hope for survival. Soon, darkness enveloped everything. Holding the gun, David sat silently in a corner of the house, his heart racing. Suddenly, a strange noise echoed. When David peeked through the window toward the sea, his blood ran cold. He saw that it wasn't just one, but a massive horde of those strange creatures emerging from the water and advancing toward him. Within moments, they swarmed the house and began battering the door. David immediately opened fire, killing a few creatures. He thought the sound of gunfire would scare them away, but seeing their companions die only made them more furious. Fire to the papers and books kept outside the gate. Terrified of the flames, the creatures retreated into the sea. But now, the fire had caught David's house. The wooden door caught fire, and because the entire house was made of wood, the flames spread rapidly. David wrapped himself in a blanket, and hid behind a large rock near the lighthouse. Suddenly, it started raining heavily, and the fire slowly died down. Could not save his house by morning. It was reduced to ashes. An alliance with Gruner. Now, he took his rifle, hid among the rocks near the lighthouse, and waited for Gruner to come out for water. When Gruner emerged, David followed him. But suddenly, a strange creature that was near Gruner attacked David. Somehow, David managed to overpower it. As it turned out, this creature was Gruner's protector. Just as David was about to shoot it, Gruner stopped him, shouting, "Stop. She is my pet." He said if Gruner wanted the creature alive, he must let David live in the lighthouse, otherwise, he would kill her. Gruner agreed because David had a lot of food supplies and gunpowder. Next morning, the creature was quietly licking David's hand. When David woke up, he was astonished to see that his deep wound had completely healed because of the creature's saliva. This amazed David. He wanted to know more about this creature from Gruner and then reveal it to the world, as it was nothing short of magic. David thought they could earn immense wealth and fame if they exposed this secret. But Gruner wanted none of it. He had no desire to leave the island. Gruner had no one left in the world, and this island was perfect for him, where he considered himself a king. He had even carved in several places on the island, "Gruner is the king here." When David asked how this strange creature became his pet, Gruner revealed that he had once saved her life when she accidentally got tangled in his fishing net as a child. Since that day, she stayed with Gruner and obeyed his every command. Gruner mentioned that she had once attacked him, and in return, he punished her so brutally that she began considering herself his slave. Now, the reason why the other creatures attacked from the sea every night became clear: they came to rescue their companion from Gruner. However, they could not attack during the day because sunlight would burn their skin. The captive and the grind. David no longer wanted to stay there, he wanted to escape the island at any cost. As evening approached, Gruner told him to get ready with the gun. Soon, a large number of creatures emerged from the sea and advanced toward the lighthouse. Gruner fired continuously, but David was paralyzed with fear. He retreated inside the lighthouse and sat in a corner despite Gruner's repeated shouting, eventually fainting. Gruner fought the creatures alone all night. The next morning, an angry Gruner threw water on David's face to wake him up and said, "If you want to live, you have to kill them. Otherwise, you will be thrown out. You have to obey my every word, fetch water daily, do chores, and stand guard duty with me at night." With no other choice, David was forced to comply. He began obeying Gruner. When night fell, they stood guard again, and the creatures attacked. But this time, David felt no fear and started firing. However, Gruner did something twisted: he locked David outside the lighthouse to force him to learn how to fight them alone. David fought all night, and by morning, Gruner found him sitting outside the gate, drenched in blood. David had now learned how to fight and survive. Time passed in this grim routine. The island felt like a prison to David, who constantly dreamed of freedom. Over time, David formed a strange bond of friendship with the female creature and felt sorry for her. He named her Anaris. The failed signal. Eventually, the attacks began to dwindle. David thought they might have migrated for winter or realized fighting was futile. But Gruner warned him that they would return with larger numbers. One night, after dinner, Gruner and David got distracted playing chess. They became so engrossed in the game that they forgot to turn on the lighthouse beams. Seizing the opportunity of darkness, a massive horde of creatures attacked. The numbers were overwhelming, and their ammunition was almost depleted. While retreating to the top of the lighthouse, Gruner severely injured his leg. They thought they wouldn't survive the night, but fortunately, dawn broke, and the creatures retreated into the sea. Under the bright sun, Anaris tried to heal Gruner's wound. But David realized they couldn't win this war: ammunition and food were running dangerously low. The next day, David spotted a ship in the distance. He rushed to get a flare gun to signal it, but Gruner stopped him because he didn't want David to leave. At that moment, Anaris attacked Gruner to protect David. Gruner didn't want anyone to leave the island because it was his kingdom, and he feared David would expose Anaris and the island to the world. Slowly, the ship disappeared over the horizon, leaving David devastated. The next morning, while Gruner was asleep, David went through his old belongings and found a photograph. His jaw dropped. The woman in the photo, the one he saw in Robert's diary on his first day, was standing next to Gruner. Gruner was actually Robert. The weather officer from a year ago hadn't died, he had simply lost his mind due to isolation, depression, and the loss of his wife. He had changed his name to Gruner and decided never to leave the island. Realizing this, David lost all hope of ever returning home. Later, David went to the shore and saw the toy boat was gone, replaced by a small creature child holding it. David threw a burning piece of wood into the circle to show he came in peace. Soon, Anaris emerged from the waves, followed by the rest of her kind. This time, they didn't attack, they just wanted peace and a safe place for their children. Suddenly, Gruner arrived with a gun. He believed that if there was peace, his tyrannical rule would end. David tried to reason with him, but Gruner yelled at Anaris to get inside. For the first time, Anaris disobeyed him. Feeling his power slip away, an enraged Gruner fired a signal flare directly at a creature child, killing it instantly. The terrified creatures fled, and Anaris looked at David, losing all trust in him. The end of the king. Furious, David chased Gruner into the lighthouse, and a brutal fight ensued. As Gruner raised an iron rod to strike David down, David screamed, "Stop, Robert. You are not a killer." Hearing his real name, Gruner froze. The reality hit him. He wasn't inherently evil, the crushing isolation, grief, and depression had shattered his mental health, turning him into a monster just to feel powerful. Overwhelmed with guilt, Gruner walked out and surrendered himself to the creatures, who promptly killed him. David locked himself inside the lighthouse. A year later, a government ship arrived with a new weather officer. The captain asked David about the previous officer, Gruner. David repeated the exact words Gruner had once told him, he went toward the sea and never came back. The new crew assumed David was Gruner, and David didn't bother correcting them. He walked out to the balcony, staring into the horizon. Just like Robert, David had now chosen to stay on the island forever. Meanwhile, Anaris was finally safe and happy with her family, living freely in the ocean, no longer fearing the tyranny of man.